When my partner Heather was very ill with a advanced ovarian cancer, she woke me up one night. It's like 3 a.m. standing beside our bed, fully dressed in a skirt, a fancy hat, and her signature orange feather boa. She was yelling or pleading. I don't know, plead yelling, pleading. You've got to accept help. Promise me you'll accept help. My first thought, switching from partner mode into registered nurse mode, was what was this bizarre medication interaction? She was on a lot of beds to combat nausea and pain and fatigue, but what would cause this particular mix of manic energy, earnest emotional persistence, and ambitious wardrobe choices? My second thought was, what on earth is she talking about? I had been sleeping. I didn't need help sleeping. Did she mean the next day when we had friends over for dinner that I should let them help cook? Despite at that time I was living in the crunchy granola capital of Portland, Oregon, in a converted Hare Krishna temple, no less. It was partly converted. My Midwest roots sometimes poke through. The next day I was serving meatloaf. I was pretty sure I could handle putting together a meatloaf. I raised an eye and pointed towards her outfit. I got dressed because this is an important conversation, as if that explained it. When I'm dead, promise me you'll accept help. So the timing of this conversation was new and I have to say kind of surprising. But the conversation, argument almost, was not new. Heather was referring to my other remnant of my stoic Germanic meatloaf infused Midwestern childhood, my inability to accept help for anything big or small. I'd say, I'm a nurse. We're helpers, not helpees. Everyone knows that. And Heather would say, really, everyone? That sounds lonely and also not true. If nurses never accept help, how does one nurse by themselves pull up patients in bed? I mean, the draw sheet, right? But she did have a point. It seemed like a separate argument, or at least a separate issue. So she pivoted to saying, just take off your nurse cap. Oh, I corrected her. Nurses have not worn caps for decades. They're unsanitary and also they get caught in the IV tubing. She was like, okay, well, take off your metaphorical nurse cap and let people help you. People like to help. Heather was a person with a lot of opinions. I called her my queen, and that was lovingly, not facetiously. But I still guess with all these exasperating arguments, she must have felt like she wasn't actually making any progress. Hence, I guess, dramatic middle of the night announcement. What I thought was like a medication interaction was actually an intervention. And then she started poking me with each word a poke. Promise me you'll accept help. Let people help you. People like to help. And I was giggling and trying to move away because, poking. But she was unrelenting, and finally I agreed. When somebody you love is dying, you say yes a lot. We'd had home hospice care for, I think, a month at that time. And some days it seemed really like Heather had a few more months to live, but then her physical condition really began to decline. The next week after this conversation I just described, I called Heather from the grocery store and I said, hey, can I bring you anything? She thought for a minute and said, how about a quarter pound of the will to live? I took a breath and I said, honey, I'm at Trader Joe's and you know how they are. They only had organic and now they're all out. She said, dang, I had a coupon too. Heather had already made inquiries about using the Oregon Medical Aid in Dying, what we used to call assisted suicide provision, to hasten her death. But that week, she began the multi-step, complicated approval process in earnest, explaining she was tired and done. But the next Tuesday at 7:30 a.m., everything was in place, and Heather wanted to die surrounded by love, and so half of queer Portland was at her house. One of her friends had flown in from San Francisco, and another friend promptly arrived at 8:02 a.m., clad in thigh-high leather boots for the occasion. Her ex-lovers, I think every single one of her ex-lovers were there, as well as her biological sisters. And for some reason, maybe because it was Portland, her massage therapist, who I called Woo Woo Carla, she liked to talk about organic kale, and she kept insisting that our cat was doing energy work for us. I was impressed, but not surprised that so many people were willing to be part of this queer death circus. Heather was loved by so many people, and she let people love and help her. Even the medical aid and dying liaison from the local hospital made a house call for the occasion. And she sat on our purple leopard print couch, surrounded by paperwork, in her Ann Taylor suit and full face of makeup, looking, to her great credit, as if this were all very customary. And this was the third partly converted Hare Krishna temple full of queer characters she'd been to just that morning. We had a goodbye circle then, and Heather took each of us behind a curtain around the bed for cuddling and private goodbyes. And being Heather, she also, of course, gave us some unsolicited advice about how we should run our lives. She told me that I should, of course, learn how to accept help, but she also suggested that I should try on my clothes before I buy them. Something about them fitting better that way. At Heather's request, I prepared the IV Zofran that she would need to keep down the lethal oral medication. I started singing the Snoopy song. Da na 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 na. It was goofy, but it was something we associated with happier times. But my voice was shaking. She said, "You know you're doing that for you, right? You know I'm okay?" Heather's friend Kina had bravely offered to be the person who put together the lethal concoction. The instructions, and this is the instructions they sent out from the experts on the medical aid and dying process, say you're supposed to put it in applesauce or water for best absorption. Heather had other plans. The last taste in my mouth is not going to be applesauce. So we mixed it in Heather's chosen medium, Cozy Shack chocolate pudding. As I handed Kina the spoon, I said, "This has got to work or she is definitely going to kill us." Kina and I went behind the curtain. Kina handed the bowl full of pudding and seconal to Heather. Heather ate what was inside of it. She died. It was terrible. And even though every single minute, every single moment of her death had been planned, I was still really, really surprised. I was surprised by how gone she felt and how alone I felt. So I sat by her bedside and cried for a little bit. And then I had heard our friends crying and talking quietly outside the curtain. And I thought about what I'd promised Heather. And I thought about how she lived her life. And so I took my pillow, my Snoopy pillow, and lifted up her head and put it underneath. And then I kissed her softly on the forehead. I said, "Okay, let people help you, Kelli. People like to help." And I walked out from behind the curtain into a massive group hug, into the arms of people who loved me and, yes, very much wanted to help. Thank you.